this article hit a very soft spot for me. It says here, Virtual Riot opens up about touring sober in candid podcast interview. The renowned DJ and electronic music producer opened up about his journey to sobriety, the creative process, and the power of vulnerability. So it says, a luminary of sound design, Virtual Riot's name has always been synonymous with his virtuosic dedication to the craft of electronic music production. But in a recent podcast conversation, he showed a different side of himself, one that's just as inspiring as his otherworldly tracks. It says here, living in LA for 8 years, Virtual Riot admits he had every excuse to party to excess, but everything changed after a stint in rehab, which was the turning point, he says, that led him to sobriety. His first performance after this life-altering decision was the 2023 Electric Forest Festival, where he stepped on stage with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. The one thing I want to kind of touch on about this, and I admitted it publicly for the first time last week, and if you're friends with me and have been friends with me, the past 5 years at all, I'm sure I've talked extensively about this, but I struggled with an addiction to cocaine and Adderall for many, many years, and going through the process of, getting off of those substances, and it was hard because I had kind of learned how to produce smoking weed and taking Adderall and staying up all night to fit all of that in there. It started to kind of revolve around those things in a way. And it really took me meeting my wife, for one, and getting that perspective on a day-to-day bird's eye view where it was oh man, not everybody does this like I do it. Realizing how much I kind of leaned on those things. I had a quite literal come to Jesus moment, where, I just realized that I was almost worshiping these things and my entire life revolved around it. And in the industry, right, especially when you're an artist, people just give it to you. And they just, whatever you need, bro, whatever you need. And back in the day, not nearly as much these days, but back in the day, it was kind of this unspoken, well, you don't party, more in the beginning. And there was less sober producers and stuff, really out there. It's much more prevalent now. I think with COVID, people had a lot of time to kind of say their piece on those things. But I mean, this stuff controlled my life in a lot of ways, and in more ways than I'm proud to admit. And it was one of those things where it's okay, you're getting all this stuff essentially just given to you, right? Not only are you expected to make all the music, but you gotta you have to do all these different jobs that feel oh, I gotta take this so I can get all this done, right? Or I gotta be a part of the moment. And I get that to a certain extent, but it kind of spiraled into something a little more dark, I guess. And I will say it wasn't, it was more just not being so exposed to it and feeling I had to be a part of every single moment that really changed my view on just doing it in general. But things like smoking weed and Adderall and all that, it's a little bit of took longer to kind of really separate myself from those things, because it's you can just do that at home or whatever, right? But I had to relearn how to kind of produce music, and I had to kind of rediscover myself on the production side, and creating music where it was I've always done it this one way, and now it's I have this kind of they said in the article, this renewed sense of clarity, but it was uncomfortable. It's oh, so I have to just sit here and and do it. It was kind of weird. I felt really proud of myself to publicly kind of address this stuff and this issue with someone like Virtual Riot, really taking a step and making a statement, especially in the dubstep community. It's not something that I feel dominates headlines. But when someone as big as Virtual Riot, or I'm pretty sure Skrillex has talked publicly about some of the stuff he was struggling with, and look at him now. He's wearing jeans and a man bun, got a beard and stuff. Dude's killing it. Posting pictures with his shirt off and stuff. So it says, since then, Virtual Riot has embraced a sober lifestyle, something he says has not dampened his creativity in the slightest. In fact, Virtual Riot notes that his staying sober has strengthened his sense of discipline and helped him connect more deeply with his craft. He likens going sober as a DJ to exposure therapy because you can't control what others are doing at your shows, but it provides a situational mechanism for building your own sense of discipline. I've had a few moments like that where it's like I easily just could have, no one would have known, and it wouldn't have mattered, right? But there's like these like key moments that I stand on, and it's like 2.5 years since I've done any cocaine, and probably like close to 2 years since I've done any Adderall, which is like that's a big deal for me. I think like that it's a really mature thing to do when you're trying to prioritize your career over, these minor situations like one show or a festival or something. I was just I started to think about it in a way where I was like, am I really risking everything for like a bump? Like someone could go buck wild and the cops get called and I got this little bag in my wallet, jail time, felony. Like I got a kid on the way. I can't be like getting caught in situations like that. That kind of mindset is what really like boosted my like, all right, I'm really done with that because I have like a much bigger goal. I have a much bigger goal in mind, and something like that simple could just ruin all of the work that I'm doing. All this like this streaming stuff, like getting records signed, like rebranding, like all that would go down the toilet for like a moment of just like cocaine. When I started to really think about it like that after being off of it for maybe like 8 to 10 months was when I really embraced that mindset. Do you feel like you've lost any of the moment while having a controlled view? No. If anything, I've been able to create a much bigger moment that I get to include people in on, and I'm not like it's like a clear-headed thing where I'm not thinking about, the next show or like where I'm going to get my next bag at or how I'm going to stay up all night to get all this stuff done. It's like I have a controlled view of my own life, which gives me the ability to like emanate that out to other people in a much clearer way, in a much more confident way. I noticed I always like would forget stuff that I'd say a lot, like over promising or, that was like my key kind of like characteristic of like something's going on, is that I would just like, yeah, I'm going to be there, and then like never be there. Especially with my family, and I've talked with my family and all that. We've like come to terms with all that and stuff. Like everything is good there, but that's like out of my character, and I was just kind of stuck in that cycle for years where it's like I felt like I needed to be a part of every moment, take the most out of every moment, and like it was just my brain was probably mush by the time that I was like, really done with it. But I never really had like physical cravings for drugs or anything like that. It was all habitual. It was all behavioral, right? It was like, oh, like I want to produce music. I need to take an Adderall so I can just like, right? And it was, I started to kind of reverse psychology myself where it's like, try to do it without that stuff. I dare you. and that's kind of how I would like, that was my internal dialogue where it's like, you don't need that. I was doing music for my entire life before I ever tried any of these substances. Like, why do I feel like I need those things to keep going when I built my entire foundation without those things, And so it was kind of like, it was tough. I'm not gonna lie, but creatively I had to rediscover myself and reestablish that discipline, where I was like, that obviously my big goal is to have this project be successful, get a manager and an agent, and like be touring full time and be able to provide for my family that way. But like I was getting in my own way, and the rebrand from Mad Hatter to WHOiSEE was a huge symbolic kind of breakaway from, I felt like I outgrew the Mad Hatter project a lot, right? And that not only with the choices I was making and the way I carried myself and, like to every little point of who I was as a person just didn't align with the Mad Hatter project anymore. And so, getting off of drugs and getting married, and like all these like very sudden big life changes kind of were, you know, it was symbolic in the WHOiSEE rebrand, right? And it's like, I'm not any worse of a producer. If anything, I'm 10 times better than I was. I'm able to make things that I'm like 10 times more proud about. I'm not just making things because like this guy made it, or like chasing trends and things like that. There's a certain degree of music production you have to do that. But I didn't feel like I was making music that was in my soul, you know? And so with the rebrand, it was, yeah, it was very like symbolic of passing that torch, and moving into this next chapter of my life, you know. And I feel like if you scroll through the Mad Hatter discography, you can kind of hear it in my music a bit, right? You can hear like towards the end, I felt like I got my sound dialed in a bit, but it was all over the place. I'm making like electro and like Moomba and dubstep and trap, like dubstep trap kind of, I guess, could go together, right? But it was like all over the place. It was very unfocused, and that was me just kind of like chasing the shiny thing for years. And think about how many amazing artists like we've lost to addiction, you know, and just like maybe not even necessarily exactly addiction, but their addiction added to their demise, you know. The biggest contributor to me like just not feeling like I needed to do those things was not putting myself in those situations anymore. And I'm grateful to have the support system that I had with my family, my wife, my church in Austin, CLA. That was like, I was very grateful to have not needed to go to like some facility or something like that. And I was able to kind of just tackle it head on. But I recognize fully that not everyone has that same kind of support system and ability to deal with it like that. So I just think it's one of those, especially on the production, like artist side, something that people just kind of glaze over. And then because it's not like such a sexy topic to talk about, it's easier for people who kind of get shiny syndrome to just be like, yeah, no problem. Yeah, whatever you want to hang out, you want the after party. It's like, I just, you know, I can't like go at that pace of the industry, you know. And also it's just everybody has their temptations, everybody has their weaknesses or whatever. So yeah, I feel like the addiction stuff, it's like it was much more like subtle and kind of peer pressury 10 years ago, when I was doing the Mad Hatter project. And now I think with how social media has evolved, the conversation is much more open. You're getting like sober, like Jesse, you're getting people just going to shows sober. And that's huge, because like ultimately it's about the music, right? And the substances for me took away, looking back, they took away. I thought they were adding to my experience, and they were like making it more fun and all this, but then I would sleep for 2.5 days, you know, because my body was just so like wringed out of anything like I just had no energy, no anything, because I just like squeezed everything, all the dopamine out in like 4 hours. That like I was just done. I was depressed, and you know, had like a lot of self-loathing things I was dealing with, also reflected in the music, right? And that's like this. I really do applaud Virtual Riot for being vulnerable like this, and it literally inspired me to do it, I guess, more publicly for the first time. So yeah, I just want to say thanks to anyone who's ever heard me, you know, complain or listen, or you know, help me deal with those things, because it was a big life shift. But you know, it's like it was a tough time, you know. But that was a big part of the rebrand, is that old kind of shell of a person that I felt like I was, especially before I met my wife, Nicole. But also like around that time, I was kind of already outgrowing that person anyways. And then getting married, getting off the drugs, you know, going to church more, just like really centering my life to figure out like what my purpose is. That was like the big thing where I was like, all right, let's get it. Like, I can do this. I think I'm meant to do this. And people have told me that it's like, dude, you're supposed to be doing this to whatever degree. And I genuinely believe that. There was a time where I was like, when I was getting off the drugs, where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be able to keep going at the pace that I was going anymore. And yeah, I've never been more wrong. But it's all about self discipline, you know.